Hello and welcome to another video from fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. It's Tuesday night, that means it's Scoutcast time. As we've said over the last couple of days, Joe is on holiday, but don't worry, there's plenty of us to step in and talk about these things in his place. My name's David.
My name is Az.
And I'm Andy.
Welcome everybody, and as I said, welcome to another episode of the Scoutcast, where many of you in recent years will know who Az is, been a regular on these videos. Not too many of you might know who Andy is, although those of you who've been watching for a long time might have a better idea. My understanding is a man who's been on this show right from the early days of Mark and Granville. So it's good to have you back, Andy. Tell us a little bit about your Scoutcast history.
Well, I did a few early doors efforts with Mark and Granville, but I ended up making it too chatty, so we'd go on for hours and hours. So I swiftly got the hook, and now, as with tonight, basically I get pulled back in when Leicester do well. That's my resident role now. When Leicester succeed,
bit like Jim White, when the transfer window's open, they take him out of his cupboard, right?
Yeah, pretty much. That's me. I'm locked in a cupboard 3 days, 300 days a year.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years, isn't it, since they...
Well, yeah.
Well, it is worth saying that actually one of the main reasons we brought you on, I mean, obviously Leicester breaking all those records is nice for you, and of course a good reason to have you on. But also the other reason we've got you on, of course, is that you shot to the top of the Fantasy Football Scouts mods and cons, moderators and contributors league out of nowhere, really. All of a sudden, top of the league, a 78-point haul in Gameweek 10. You're admittedly level with Neil, but it's Neil's day off, so we figured we'd go for you as well. I mean, we'll talk about your Gameweek 10 shortly, but I mean, just a few words on how your season's gone so far, and obviously Leicester tied in with that, aren't they?
Yeah, well, if anybody who does know me, I am a contrarian by nature, so I like to not necessarily pick the picks everyone picks. So I've got no Liverpool, I've got no Man City. I just get a bit bored with doing what everyone else does. So the fact I'm at the top is pretty ludicrous, to be honest.
Sums up this season, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
so
Don't know, you carry on, so I cut across you there.
I figured I would probably, but as soon as I decided to go down that track, I was comfortable finishing like bottom 5% of the league. But I've just slowly crept my way back up somehow with some good choices, with Leicester doing miraculously well, and it's quite frightening, really.
Well, especially if you're Southampton. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail shortly. But Az, you're right to tell us all of the things we're going to talk about tonight, because unfortunately for Andy, we've got to talk about more than just Leicester.
It is a shame, and I'm channeling my inner Mark with my red wine tonight to try and put me back on track on my season. But today we will be looking back at Game Week 10. It was really, really good for some people, like Andy, and really, really bad for others, like me and you, David. So we're going to look at our own teams in a bit more detail, and also talk about some other roughs and the smooths from the community. We'll be looking at key discussion points for Game Week 11. So how do we handle Pep Roulette, as the term now goes? How to best invest in Leicester. Andy, coming to you again, and whether budget defenders are making an even stronger comeback. And then we'll be talking about differentials, clean sheets, our own transfer and captain plans for the week ahead.
Great stuff, as you say, lots to get through. So let's dip straight back into Game Week 10 in more specific detail. And as you mentioned, they're absolutely fantastic week for Andy, mostly orientating around that Leicester result. Not too many other teams scored 9 goals in Game Week 10, did they? And obviously invested in the right areas, weren't you, Andy?
Well, yeah. So for people who don't know, as well as being contrarian, I am a Leicester fan. So if Leicester on television, if they're playing a bad football side, I'm pretty inclined to put the captain on Jamie Vardy. All logic goes out the window at that point. So Friday night football, I thought maybe I'll get 1 goal, 2 goals, try and fight against the City onslaught that will come. So when they just kept piling them in, and when we were like 4-0 up, I thought, how have I got no points from this? But then by full time, Jamie Vardy had 20 points, 40-point captain. Pretty much, yeah. I think that's pretty much on par with Az's full team score. About to rub it in. So
yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, I mean it was the perfect week. I mean, in terms of your transfers, I believe Mopay in. which is a great transfer there, I think. With the very nice short-term fixtures and in good form as well. Hudson-Odoi's come in as well. I think Az did that too. Pukki and Felipe Anderson out, so some good action there. Thankfully, neither of those two players punished you. But crucially, I mean, what happened for your overall rank was you went from 225k in the world to 63, which is fantastic.
Will Pay's pretty good, I think. So I'd always get him in, and Pukki's doing really bad. But Callum Hudson-Odoi's pretty muffed up now, especially with Pulisic getting a hat-trick, but we'll see.
Yeah, lots to consider moving forward. Let's have a look just quickly at my team before we have a look at Az's, because I think there's some crossover, especially with Hudson-Odoi. I mean, really, it's all about Aguero for me. I decided I thought, I'm going to have two last hurrahs for Aguero, 2 home matches against relatively poor defences, and 9 times out of 10 that's going to pay off because Aguero starts the home matches, right? Not this week. This was the week that Aguero didn't start the home match, and he came on for that 1-point cameo. Sterling was my vice with 11 points, so it really just centred around that. Thankfully, my transfer paid off because I did burn to Rico, Bournemouth, as we're going to discuss a little bit later, showing some clean sheet potential now, and they kept another one, of course. And Rico, to be honest, looked like he could have scored. He had a fantastic chance to score an absolute screamer in the first half. So I'm quite happy about that particular transfer. But it's just I feel like I'm already down, and FPL is just kicking me every week. I know a lot of people feel the same way. It's kind of like that Simpsons gif where they're like, stop. It's already dead. That's my team right now, and just every week it's just another punch. So I've dropped from 528k to 900k, and really that drop happened on Friday night because so many people in and around where I was had Leicester players. I didn't have any. I thought they'd beat Southampton. I didn't think they'd score 9 goals, but yeah, it's just another season of frustration for me. So that's just how it goes. But at least I had one more point than Az, which means we get to do you last. I'm sorry. That's just the saving grace. You got 41 points, I believe. Or 45, but with a hit. So, swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, I mean, I won't go into too much detail. I mean, I wrote the article for the site earlier today that kind of documents what exactly has gone wrong for me this season. Essentially, this week, I just really wanted to get KDB back. And I just knew that Mahrez wasn't going to play, just because this ban for Bernardo Silva is just dragging on. No one really knows what's going on with it. The reason I had Mahrez was because I thought the FA were going to come down quite hard on Bernardo Silva and at least ban him for a few matches, but that hasn't happened. So don't count your chickens before they hatched, I guess, is the lesson. But it just feels like I've kind of just swapped out one punt in Mahrez for another punt now with Hudson-Odoi. So I've joined Andy on that train. He looked like a really good pick. Like he's been kind of really, really bright for Chelsea. He was bright when he came on. Could have won the penalty if VAR hadn't got involved. Probably wasn't the penalty, but still unlucky to have it taken off him. But yeah, I've got rid of Mason Mount. So I kind of feel like I've got rid of the only player in my team who's consistently been delivering, and brought in a kind of another wild punt in Hudson-Odoi. But I'm just hoping this Pulisic thing. I mean, it's pretty unlucky. I mean, I'm not unlucky is probably not the right word, but his competition getting a hat trick in the game that he benches Hudson-Odoi for is a bit unexpected. So hopefully he'll get his place back.
Yeah, it was certainly out of the blue, wasn't it? I think Hudson-Odoi had assists in each of his last 3, so it's pretty good form. And it seems like what happened with Pulisic was that he really just came into the team after doing well in training, which we obviously can't see. So, getting in on Hudson-Odoi, I wouldn't feel. I'd be frustrated, but I wouldn't be kicking myself because, as you're right, like nobody saw a Pulisic hat-trick coming. So that's just the way it goes. I mean, there's some people. I mean, we all sort of complain about how our teams went this week, but as I believe there's probably even worse than what me and you have suffered. There always is. So talk us through the rough with the smooth.
There's always worse, which is good. I mean, Rascal the Bear got 24 points, so that's half of what I got, pretty much. So that's it. Chris Martin benched Perez after all these weeks of holding on to him, and then he gets a hat trick in a 9-0 win. Pretty rough. Farmer Fat, he got a game score of 30. He had Sterling captain until the last minute, changed to Aguero. He's kept faith with Luca Dean. It's his 4th sub 40 game week in a row. So it's the 4th week he's got less than 40 points. He was 100k and now he's 2.8 million. I mean, it doesn't get.
Oh, that's a
You think
horrible drop.
your rank is spiraling, Dave. I mean, 100k to 2.8 million in 4 weeks. That is pretty impressive.
That's horrible.
And the last one of the roughs, the road dog, he benched Chilwell's 19 points because he read somewhere that Southampton has scored in all of their home games, and he was getting frustrated with benching all of Lundstram's points, and he captained Aguero, so that cost him about 25 points. I mean, benching a player who gets sort of 19, 20 points is just, yeah, I can't. I think I benched Luca Dean last year when he scored those 2 goals against.
Pointer at Burnley. Yeah, I did that.
Yeah, that was fun. Anyway, some sleuths because other people are doing quite well. So FPL Triple Nutmeg, his daughter's in one of these zombie leagues, where you kind of leave your team for the season, and she had Pulisic and Perez in that team. So she's shooting up the rankings. A shout out to a guy in one of my cash leagues and one of the best FPL players sort of in the world, Grant Barkley. So he's having an absolutely terrible season, and the only thing that's kept me going is the fact that he's been below me. So what does he do this season? He takes an 8-point hit, he gets rid of Pookie, Pepe, Mahrez and Luca Dean, and he brings in Vardy, Martial, KDB and Soyuncu.
That's inspired.
With the 8-point hit, 30 points up, including the hit. So just that's just an elite manager making great moves. Mark as well. Shout out to Mark. He brought in Cancelo and Mendy this week, 2 Man City defenders, both got clean sheets. So yeah, amazing. And then a few people took hits for Vardy. So Man United comeback, Dybala, and he captained him. So he went up 1 million places to 400k. So although things are bad, one good game week and you can suddenly be right back up there.
Yeah, that's what we've all got to hold on to. Well, one of the reasons that people have been so frustrated and the season has been so great for some people or not so great for others does seem to come down to Man City, doesn't it? So that's our first sort of talking point. We've kind of gone down the line of the player we're talking about is Aguero, but obviously this discussion point is not restricted to him. We can talk about Sterling and KDB as well. why don't you take us through some of the community questions on this one?
Yeah, so this City we seem to talk about them kind of every week, and that's what everyone kind of talks about because it's how do you best make use of the best attacking team in the league. So Kamsi asks, how does Aguero fit into Man City's rotation plans? He seems to be getting rotated a lot more than in previous seasons. Last year, I remember he was getting taken off at like 60, 70 minutes for Jesus, whereas this year he's just missing like 4 games for him. So Sean asks, how do we handle Aguero and Jesus rotation? For reasons unknown, says, what do we do with Aguero? People are looking at selling him before Southampton at home, which is pretty risky. Jurgen Rogers says he'd like to hear the thoughts on offloading City assets after game week 10 because their fixtures turn pretty rough. And that's echoed by Maximus Bonimus Pointimus, fantastic name, who says, is their fixtures a cause of concern? So let's come to you, Andy. You haven't got any City players.
Yep.
Guessing you're not going to get any City players because that's not how you play the game.
The annoying thing is now I'm done so well, it kind of feels like I almost should just to consolidate my position, as it were. Get Sterling in the boiler.
It's dangerous. It's dangerous when you start doing that.
I can't do it. Game weeks come around, but the Aguero situation is definitely difficult because City are playing right now, and they're fielding both Aguero and Jesus. So Guardiola's not even giving anybody any help in this case.
It's almost like he did it on purpose, isn't it? People are wondering who's going to play, and it's like, well, I'll just start both. What now?
Yeah.
Sterling's got a complete rest. He's not even on the bench, so you'd think he's at least safe for the Southampton game at the weekend. But after that, I would probably be looking to minimise them a bit because the fixtures do turn. They're Manchester City. They're going to score goals. They're going to score points. But for me, when it comes to the premium players, it always comes down to the captaincy in the end. So if you've got 12 million sterling and you're not going to captain him for 7 weeks, I wouldn't say it's smart to sell him, but I'd be more confident than any other time in the season, basically. It's worth taking a risk sometimes. It might fail like a giant catastrophe, but it's a game. So
yeah,
give it a go.
Yeah, I mean, the Aguero seems tricky for owners because I can see the logic of people wanting to sell him, but also you are selling a player who, if he starts, could conceivably get 4 or 5 goals. So it's risky. Whereas Sterling has been kind of, Pep's come out and said that one of the things he likes most about him is ability to recover.
Yeah.
So if I was looking at selling one of them, I'd definitely be looking at selling Aguero because of the captaincy thing. People don't feel comfortable captaining him anymore. Whereas with Sterling, he looks like he is going to play the majority of games, even if he's playing in the Champions League. So I think that makes him a better option going forward than Aguero. But David, you've got Aguero. What are you doing with him?
Well, I mean, this week is his final chance, which some people have lost interest already. But I mean, I'll start by talking about Southampton, and we are going to talk a little bit more about Southampton when we talk about the Leicester topic, because I think they seem to be at the centre of everything. Southampton defending was so bad on Friday night that
It was abysmal.
It was just absolutely terrible. I mean, I did an article on site. Some people have probably read it at this point. Where I've said I personally, as an individual, have never been a professional football player, but I have played in games where I have witnessed better defending than Southampton put on. It was just that bad. So if Man City are about to play that team, then it just feels madness to sell an attacker, especially of the quality and the pedigree and the history of Aguero. It just, to me, feels completely just the wrong thing to do. And the thing is, people sort of could turn around and say, well, do you think, he's going to get rotated? Surely you could end up with another 1 point cameo. Yeah, maybe. But I kind of look at it along the lines of, it's kind of a bit like double or nothing. There's sort of like tactics in a lot of sort of gambling things like roulette or poker or blackjack or whatever, where when you lose on a particular call, you can sometimes make that ground back by just pretty much just doubling down and doing the same thing again if you feel like it could come up. Because enough people, I think, will get rid of Aguero this week that if he starts against Southampton and they're as bad as they were on Friday night, then we could be looking at Aguero on like a 4 or 5 goal haul. The kind of stuff that the history and legends are made of with him against this particular team. But it is the last chance though, and just simply because when you look at the fixtures after that, as Andy's already mentioned, they're quite tricky, they're quite tough, but a lot of them crucially really are kind of like away from home. Most of them are over the next 8, and generally that's when Jesus has played. So I memean, obviously they've got Southampton at home next, but then they've got Liverpool away, Chelsea at home, Newcastle away, Burnley away, Man United at home, Arsenal away. And I just that particular period, I don't look at it and feel like I want to have a rotation prone forward. So it really is just a short term. This is his last opportunity. Even if he gets me 5 or 6 goals, I'm probably still going to sell. And I think that, like I said, I think I can be fairly confident he's going to start this game, because I've seen a lot of people that are worried that he's playing. That people are seeing that he's playing tonight and gone, right, that's it, you're gone. But he's already had his rest in game week 9 and game week 10. And we've often seen Pep sort of play a kind of rotation format based around fitness, where someone won't play a game, but then that enables them to play the next 2, even if those 2 games are like 3 days apart. And because he's done that with Sterling before, he's done it with De Bruyne, he's done it with Jesus, and he's done it with Aguero. So the fact that he played hardly any of game week 10, played hardly any of game week 9, that to me says he's got enough in the bank to play tonight and at the weekend. And of course,
I love this.
And the fact that Jesus is playing too. If Jesus plays the whole game and Aguero comes off, then that smacks of Aguero is going to start. So it is a risk. I do appreciate it's a risk, but if it comes off, it could be spectacular, because that Southampton defence is just absolutely dreadful. So, but long term, I got to echo everything you guys have already said in terms of I can't trust Aguero for that period. So I had a look at sort of minutes that's been played by premium assets over the whole season so far. Players that are priced, I think 9.2 or higher. How many minutes they've played, and you've got top of the pile Aubameyang and Vardy, 900 minutes, the maximum possible you can play. Kane's played 895, Firmino 834, Salah 792, Sterling 792. So he's played the most minutes of any premium asset of the Man City players. So you can largely be confident that he's going to start most games, probably because of what Guardiola said about the way that he recovers really well. So then Sterling, for me, I'd really like to keep. Then you've got Mane 788, Pepe 729, De Bruyne's on 696, but obviously he's had the injury, so you kind of have to factor that in. I think having Sterling and De Bruyne, I wouldn't be too worried about them getting rotated. It's just you've got to ask yourself, are you happy with the fixtures having 2 attackers? Which you could do because it's Man City. Going further down the list, Son 621, Aguero 575, Jesus 287, Lacazette 258. So Aguero and Jesus are like really far down the pack when you're looking at premium assets, how often they're playing. So yeah, just Aguero, I just think you've got to stay away from. He's probably going to, you just can never tell when he's going to play. Then just the other stats I've got on the screen, minutes per XGI over the last 4 matches. Aguero is actually still top of that. That's why I'd be confident that if he does start against Southampton, he would do well. Just because it's just showing that while he's on the pitch, he's predicted to do quite well. But yeah, it can't last longer than this game week. You seem to be shocked there as that I'm going for it. Do you think this is a bit of a too bold a move to hold on to him one last time?
No, I'm not shocked that you holding on to him. I'm shocked that you trying to second guess Pep and his team sheets by saying Aguero's missed 2 matches, so he's probably going to play next. Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't be selling Aguero this week. I think, we play this game for fun at the end of the day, and Aguero, if you think about ceilings, Aguero has pretty much the highest ceiling of any player, bar Jamie Vardy in a 9-0 win, of any player in the Premier League. So I just think it's just too risky to sell him this week. I think what's interesting about the match tonight is that no one really cares about the score because everyone's sort of just thinking that City are going to roll them over anyway. What people care about is what minutes is Aguero going to get and what minutes is Jesus get. Because you're right, if Aguero comes off at 60, 65 minutes and he just plays the whole game, then I think that makes Aguero the best captain pick for the weekend. So yeah, I'd definitely be holding him. I can see people why they want to make the switch from Aguero to Vardy, but I think you might miss. You've already missed out on a price rise. You might miss out on another 0.1 if you wait. But really, I think you've got to give it a week.
I think it's all about timing, isn't it? That's the thing. I think Vardy is going to who I turn to, or technically turn back to, because I sold him game week 3 because I'm a genius. But Leicester this week are playing Palace, and we'll probably talk about this in a little bit more detail when we move on to our Leicester section. If Aguero and Vardy both start game week 11, and Aguero's at home against Southampton, and Vardy's away to Palace, Aguero is the better option. I don't really think anyone can disagree there.
Oh, guess what, David? Aguero's just scored.
Oh, has he? Oh, well, there we go. See, he's still got it. See,
and so is Otamendi.
Yeah, I love that. I did see that earlier. Absolutely sticking it in the eye of fantasy managers there.
I mean, a player who he's starting to creep into a few more teams, but I think is possibly being overlooked a bit is David Silva. So he's had the most double-digit hauls now of any player sort of in the game. He's starting most matches and being rested in the Champions League and the Cup quite a lot as well. And I thought it was interesting because with Rodri out and Fernandinho going back into centre back, De Bruyne's playing in that horrible sort of more deep lying playmaker type role that he was in a couple of seasons ago when he was still a decent FPL option. Like, he'd tick over with the assists and he'd get 200 points and be happy. But at the moment, if he's playing in that role, he's just not playing we didn't look like he was playing as advanced against Villa as he has been. Well, he's almost playing as a striker in some games, playing really far in the box. So I do worry a bit whether that's going to mean De Bruyne's points regress. And actually, if Silva is going to be the one starting a bit further up the pitch, then he might be a bit of a left field option to go for people considering someone out of City. Because, I mean, really, even when City's fixtures turns, I think you still need at least one City attacker, apart from Mandy.
Well, for a 72-year-old who's like in his last season, Silva is doing fantastically well.
Yeah.
Like you say, he, considering the points he's got, he's thrown under the radar so much. I think he's only a few shy of being in the season dream team at the moment. So he's under 8 million, and like you say, he's pretty much being saved for the Premier League at the moment. So if I was to get Man City pay, it probably would be him at the moment because he's a bargain, really, and he probably will be prodding the odd goal in the net still.
And 12% ownership as well.
Yeah,
so,
really good alternative from a differential perspective, especially those of us who are having a bad year as well. I mean, I've been looking at players I can get in just to kind of get steal a march on people, and David Silva was one of them. Another one, it's actually just been mentioned in the chat. I'll just come to you briefly on this one, Andy. What would your thoughts be on Mendy, who is back in the fold? Zinchenko's injured. Do you think he presents a good opportunity?
I think so, yeah. Because Mendy thrived last year when Sane was injured, didn't he? Because he's not got any yet, but his assist threat comes when he's not got a winger right in front of him. So he's played 2 to 3 games consistently. He's not got broken down or injured. Under 6 million, he'd be the one I look at again, because there's lots of people who've stuck with Otamendi at the moment who are getting a bit miffed that he hasn't played in about 3 weeks. Whereas Mendy's seemingly got his legs back in him. So of the Man City defenders, he strangely seems possibly even the most assured right now. which
Yeah.
you say that a month ago and you would have laughed in my face, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, he certainly presents a good option, and of course, if the great Mark Sutherland has brought him in, then maybe he's definitely worth
True.
considering.
Just do whatever Mark does, basically, then you'll be fine.
Yeah, if only we had a way of finding out his transfers before the deadline. Otherwise, we'd all end up being 1 week behind him. But hey, that's just how it goes. Let's move on to our second section then. Let's come to you now, Andy. We've had obviously loads of questions that have come in about your beloved Leicester. Breaking all those records, it was quite a sensational night, regardless of who you support. The neutrals particularly enjoyed it. The Leicester fans particularly enjoyed it. The Southampton fans, I don't know. If you want Hasenhüttl to get sacked, maybe you did enjoy it. But, a big night. Fantastic fixtures coming up for them as well. So tons of questions come in. Yeah, talk us through what the community have been wondering. And, let's go from there.
Well, yeah, judging by the ticker, we are still the best ranked team in the season at the moment. So we are, regardless of even the fixture we just had, which is almost an aberration of amazing scores, we've got the best fixtures coming ahead. So you just want to get some Leicester players in your team, otherwise you may fall back a bit. So we've got Kamsi, who asked who the best Leicester players to own are. We've got Zay Austin, who wants to know the best Leicester. Alchemist, wondering if a double up on the Leicester attack's worth it. But he's also pondering, do we overrate the result against Southampton? Because as much as I love Leicester, our two best performances this season have been against 10 men. So, we are doing well, we're playing well. Rodgers has done it great for our side, but are we over-egging and pudding a bit, thinking, oh, Leicester amazing, when forgetting we basically scored 8 goals against a 10-man team who couldn't tie their own shoelaces. And then we've got KTK Interista asking if it's really time to view Leicester as a top 4 side. And if so, should we consider them as captains? Obviously, I'd say yes, but a more logical mind, yourself or Az, might offer a more measured opinion. And then, for reasons unknown, also says, should we have 3 Leicester attackers? So should we just go all in the basket and back the Leicester attack with these prime blue fixtures looking ahead?
Well, let's go to you first then, Az. What's your thoughts on the Leicester? I don't want to say conundrum, but dilemma, perhaps.
Yeah, well, I don't think there is much of a dilemma. I think we do have to consider them as a top 4 side, not only because of how well they're playing and the fact they've come out of, a quite a tough run of fixtures to start the season, and they're so high up in the season. They've had a couple of big wins. They've got options sort of all over the park. So I don't think the dilemma is, do we get Leicester players in? The question is, how many do you get in, and what positions do you get them in? So I went for Ricardo Pereira in the wild card. I left enough money in the bank to do Pukki Vardy, but that's another story because I got priced out of it. But Pereira in terms of defenders has got by far the best stats. Chilwell kind of sat somewhere in the middle with kind of okay-ish assist potential. I mean, I think the 19 points he got against Southampton, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but that just seems an absolute 1 in a million. Is never going to happen again.
His goal was jammy as all heck, to be honest. He did the most terrible scuff shot, and he's kind of just still running forward, and the ball lands at his feet. Oh, I'll score. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, the whole game, wasn't he? It was as if Hasenhüttl had said, "Don't worry about Chilwell. We don't need to mark him." And just for a whole 90 minutes, he could do whatever he wanted. So, yeah.
The way I kind of looked at it when I was picking on my wildcard was, you've got Soyuncu, who is cheap, 4.7. Ceiling wise, he's going to get a clean sheet, maybe a couple of bonuses. That's it. Chilwell, you might get the odd assist. You pay sort of 0.7, 0.8 more. He didn't have much goal threat, but he does put some crosses in. You could, end up with a fairly decent side. But Pereira was the one who, he's taking the most shots. He's the most creative player. He's the furthest up the pitch. He'd already scored twice this season. You pay more for the premium defender, but you were getting a lot more for your money. So to me, he was quite a sensible pick to go for in defence. If I was going to pick now, I would probably go for Chilwell and save the 0.6, 0.7 million over Pereira, because Pereira just hasn't been able to kind of repeat his early season form. So it could feel a little bit like you're sort of chasing last week's points, but I now don't think there's that much in it between them. Chilwell isn't going to get 19 points again, but I think he's proved that he can actually deliver some fairly sizable returns. So he'd be the defender I get. In midfield, I mean, I still love Maddison. David, you must be regretting selling him a few weeks ago, right?
And I've had Vardy and Maddison at various stages this season, and yeah, They're gone. They're gone from my team. I mean, they might come back, but it does sting. But I totally get it. I can understand why he's popular.
It was interesting though that I mean, again, Andy's a better place to talk about this, but from what I saw, it looked like Maddison was playing quite deep in the game against Southampton, even when they were down to 10 men, and it was actually Tielemans who was looking more advanced in that game.
Oddly, because I've got my 3 Leicester contingent, which is Pereira, Maddison, and Vardy. And if I could have a fourth, without a doubt, it would be Tielemans. He's such good value, and he's so assured. Even tonight, he's already got a goal and assist at Burton. So he is utter class. He's better than Leicester in reality. So I'm so happy we've got him, because I probably, if I hadn't thought about it, I would have got him over Maddison. I'm happy with Maddison. He's a good player. He'll get points. But Tielemans just oozes class whenever he's on the ball. So he'll get you a return every week. He was doing it last season in the last term. He had a couple of weeks off this time, but that's football, isn't it? But you would bank on him. He basically seems like our version of Frank Lampard back in the old days. He'll run into the box, he'll do some slinky passes, and he's just I don't want to gush too much. He's magnificent.
It's one of those ones, isn't it? You've got options. Neither of them a bad pick. I mean, Maddison's got all the set pieces. He, the free kick he scored. I mean, as soon as he stepped up to that, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind he was going to. It was just the most obvious goal ever. And having a player like that who's so good at those and creates so many chances like he does, even if he is playing deeper, it still makes him a great option. I think between him and Tielemans, and then I mean, I really like Harvey Barnes as well at 5.9. Or has he gone up to 6 now? I mean, he does get subbed early fairly often, but for kind of a 6 million midfielder, he loves a shot, and he got 3 assists in the against Southampton, which I think is his 3rd sort of attacking return in a row. So I really like Harvey Barnes. What about Perez though? So Perez is an interesting one. Would you be considering getting him back in? I mean, he's burned so many people. I mean, the whole FPL Scout community, I think, was burned by him to start with.
He's a very form player, so Perez will get a mention from me later. But I definitely think now he's got his goals, I expect that's a huge weight off his shoulders, because he's not a record signing, because Tielemans is, but he's come for a lot of money. He took 2 months to get a goal for the club, and now he's got good fixtures ahead of him. So, but there's literally a bounty of options at Leicester. I think you can make an argument for pretty much any player on the pitch, apart from maybe Kasper Schmeichel, because you can't get any type of forward return. So you can pick anybody else who's going to play, and you go, I can understand why you want to pick that player. He's either good value, he's got set pieces, he's got attack. I'm quite happy with how Leicester are going right now.
And it's amazing with Vardy as well, because you haven't got the worry of any Jesus like waiting in the background. He is going to play every game. In terms of, one of the questions is on captaincy, and that is what Vardy gives you. He gives you someone who is going to play 90 minutes every week for a really attacking side in great form. And really, it reminds me of a few years ago when Leicester won the league and everyone was kind of overlooking Vardy and Mahrez and still captaining other players. I think there is real potential over the next sort of 6-7 weeks to just stick the captaincy on Vardy and just enjoy the goals that he's going to score, because I think he's going to carry on scoring.
I've literally had that discussion with one of my friends. I discussed whether I should consider getting Man City players back in because I'm doing so well. But then I was like, I said to him, I'm literally going to captain Vardy until Christmas now. So what's the point? Because he is just assured of starts. He's 32 years old, but still plays like a 27-year-old. And you're just going to bank on him being there to prod the ball in the net. And worst comes to worst, something I always like to rely on, he's got his penalties. So
yeah, exactly. And I mean, next week Liverpool play City in a game where I don't think too many people are going to be captaining those players. And Vardy's at home to Arsenal, which, I mean, that game just screams goals for Vardy, doesn't it? So
Vardy against David Luiz, Socrates.
I would be. It's why I've moved so quickly to bring Vardy in, because if I didn't have Vardy going into the Arsenal game, I would be more petrified of pretty much anyone else this season. I think he really is as close to essential at the moment as you can get. So yeah, I just think it's a great pick. David, anything to add?
Yeah, well, I mean, Leicester. I've tried not to. It's my fault. It's completely my fault. They've. I stop saying they. I have completely mishandled them this season. But I mean, you guys have kind of. I agree with pretty much everything you said. I mean, they look great right now. I've already mentioned earlier that I think that for getting Vardy in for my position and other people who have Aguero, the timing is important. I'm not going to bring him in this week. I'm going to bring him in the week after, because if he goes up in price one more time, it doesn't really make a huge difference to me, because if I'm downgrading from Aguero to Vardy, I'm getting so much money out of that anyway. So I'm happy to absorb the price rise, because I do think that Aguero will outscore him this week. But then after that, it's just you're right. You can't look past Vardy. I think Arsenal, perfect fixture for them. Brighton away. Brighton recently have shot to the top of big chances conceding loads. So he's going to do well there. He loves doing well away from home. Everton's defence not look great this year. Watford making some improvements, but it's Vardy. He doesn't care. Aston Villa, again, quite a porous defence. And then game week 17 at home to Norwich, which, I mean, you look at that week. Chelsea at home to Bournemouth. That's about the only other fixture I can see really contending for probably like the most obvious captaincy. Vardy at home against Norwich. But so yeah, completely agree with pretty much everything everyone said. But just on the one thing that I just kind of wanted to touch on was the do we overrate their result against Southampton? I think you guys have kind of already covered it, but I think overwhelmingly yes. I mean, they're never ever going to play a defence as terrible as that ever again. So just to sort of touch on the Chilwell kind of issue. I can see why you would maybe want to downgrade from Pereira, but if you own Pereira right now, I wouldn't want to downgrade personally, because we've seen enough from Pereira, I think, to suggest that the returns will come there. And it was a bit of an anomaly that week. Neil did a fantastic article actually in the build-up to game week 10, suggesting that players who play on the left would do very well against Southampton because they've conceded more chances down their right-hand side than any other team this year. And that obviously came to pass, as we've already touched on.
It's amazing foresight.
Yeah. I mean, Neil is just. I still maintain he's the best fantasy football writer on the planet. So always pay attention to anything he writes. But yeah, it came to pass, and anyone who watched the game will have seen. It wasn't just Chilwell who had the freedom of Southampton, it was Harvey Barnes as well. So they had all the time in the world, because down that side of the pitch, Southampton are really weak. Are Leicester going to face a side who are really, really poor on their right-hand side every week? Absolutely not. So, Chilwell obviously dominated that game in terms of distribution. 6 chances created, 3 of them big. Pereira didn't create any chances. But as I said, that particular side of the pitch was always going to have more joy. But a few other just sort of interesting stats to come out of the game. Maddison didn't create a single chance in that game. So as you mentioned, played in a sort of deeper role. Southampton in that game conceded 15 shots on target, of which 9 of them were goals, which is a goal conversion rate of those shots on target of 60%, which is just completely unsustainable. So I mean, I don't really think anyone out there is suggesting that Leicester is going to score 9 again. Not even Andy's saying that, because that would just be crazy. But I still maintain that game was won, or rather lost, by the fact that Southampton's defence was so dreadful. And like I said, it's all about timing for me. I do think that away from home to Crystal Palace, where Palace have before they hosted Man City, they conceded just once in 4 home matches this season, and that was right at the death against Wolves. And to be fair, the teams they played, they weren't amazing, but they still held Man City to 2 goals, which at the moment is quite impressive. Palace just always make you work really hard, and I think that maybe Vardy will do something in that game. Maybe 1 goal, and he's always good for bonus. So I think maybe an 8 or a 9. But as I said, as an Aguero owner right now, I think you've already mentioned it, as his ceiling is so high for that game. I'm expecting double figures, whereas with Vardy, I'm just thinking the 1 goal. I mean, he might prove me wrong, but it's all just about what are you prepared to gamble on your transfers. Just a few other sort of stats that I thought were quite interesting. You mentioned Harvey Barnes there. He's in the top 3 for minutes per XGI of Leicester players. All Brighton's actually top. Perez is 2nd. Harvey Barnes is 3rd. Vardy's 4th and Maddison's 5th. But of course, I always find it sort of tricky with the wide positions. I mean, maybe we'll come back to you on this in a second, Andy, about terms of predicting who's going to play. I feel like Albrighton and Barnes and Perez not quite as nailed on in the team as your Vardys, your Tillmans and your Maddisons, right?
So we've got a spine that's definitely there. The width, it looks like Barnes and Perez are starting to hammer down spots, but if, say, Damari Gray has a good second half against Burton today, some point gets given a shot back in the team, because we've got good performers on the bench wanting to still get into the Leicester 11. It's not like night and day between the quality there. So
I mean, you
there's
look at
always a risk.
you look at the minutes of Perez and Barnes, and they're pretty grim reading, really. I mean, Perez, the last kind of 3 matches has been 17 minutes, 66 minutes, 73. And then you look at Barnes, and it's been the last 4, 57, 45, 78, 71. So it is this, and the worry is that we fall into the same trap that we fell into with Hudson-Odoi, is that maybe Barnes misses out because he's tired for some reason, at the weekend, and then Damari Gray comes in, has an absolute blinder, and then suddenly you're worrying every week that your Barnes or your Perez isn't going to play. So I think it's definitely a gamble, but the thing is, it's such a good price at around 6 million. It almost feels worth the risk.
Yeah, I know exactly what I mean. I think one other thing just on Barnes, what we were seeing statistically from last year was that he absolutely loved the shot, but he could very rarely get it on target. And I think obviously there's been some improvement, but yeah, you're right. I think if Damari Gray has a good game or looks good in training, or maybe he's what Rodgers wants in a particular tactical situation compared to Harvey Barnes, then yeah, it could be something that becomes an issue. Just finally, just a few extra stats on Leicester, although I will caveat it with, so a lot of people asking where Joe is. A lot of people like that Joe's catchphrase of recent weeks seems to have been, Jamie Vardy is a complete and utter stat buster, and that is completely true. But, it's really interesting to see that over the last sort of 4 weeks, Leicester have overachieved their XG by more than any other team, which would put me off the triple up 100%. Mainly because so if you're going to triple up on the Leicester attack, it's Maddison, Tielemans, and Vardy are the best 3. But when you still got Mason Mount offering good value, and I struggle on the triple up. The double up I think could do well, but Vardy I think is, as you say, near to essential. But whether or not I'd couple him with Maddison and or Tielemans, I'm not hugely convinced yet, because their XG for most of the season has been relatively low. I mean, we'll see. I mean, I'm not saying don't do it. But if you're trying to base some of these decisions on some stats, they're not up there with your Cities and your Chelseas and your Liverpool quite yet. They could get to that, and the fixtures might help them. But that's just one thing. And then, but just people say Vardy's the stat buster. I have actually managed to find a stat, which we all knew anyway, that is at least one stat that explains why he busts all the other ones, and that's just goal conversion. Because from forwards over the last, I think 6 game weeks he's got the best goal conversion out of all of them. Although level with Calvert-Lewin, so fair play to Dominic there. But when Vardy has a shot, it goes in. That's just how he rolls. So Vardy for me, you've got to have him either, if not this week or the week after. But I'd want to see a little bit more from them. Which sounds stupid because they scored 9 last week. But I'd want to see a little bit more from them in a better, tougher fixture. I mean, Palace is actually a good acid test if you're not going to go straight in. Because if they make light work of Palace, then I think we can be confident that this team really is as amazing as some people are suggesting.
It's a fair point, yeah. It'll be all guns blazing. If we get 2, 3, 4 goals against Palace, I think it'll be unstoppable at that point. Leicester will be loading onto every squad.
Yeah, because the sorry, go on.
You guys, I've talked for too long.
I was just going to say that I've always liked with the pace of Vardy up front. I've always liked it when he plays against teams like Southampton or teams like Arsenal, teams that kind of try and attack. Whereas when he's playing against teams like Burnley, so they played Burnley last week, and I know Vardy got 10 points, but they did struggle more in that game, and it was quite a controversial win in the end. But Palace are going to be another test of a team who are very solid defensively, aren't going to massively sort of give them loads of space to work the magic of Vardy's pace. So they're the kind of the tricky games. The thing is that you had Burnley, so potentially tricky game, and then Southampton, good looking game on paper, and then Palace, all tricky looking game, and then Arsenal again. So it kind of works well in this kind of scenario for people with Aguero, or people who can't quite do it this week, because I think this Palace game, I'm going to regret saying this, but I think you could potentially get away with waiting if you didn't desperately care about the price rise. So I had to do it this week. I had to do it early because I couldn't afford to lose another point to Vardy. But if you're downgrading from someone like Aubameyang or from someone like Aguero, then I think you can potentially wait this week and get him in for Arsenal.
Yeah, I think timing is everything when it comes to fantasy, isn't it? Because so much of the frustration that we often get is maybe all flocking to 1 or 2 players en masse because of something that happened in the most recent game week. And I think this season more than ever, we've seen that just basically any kind of short-term massive bandwagon sometimes just becomes a bit unstuck. I always like to have more data, and it sounds like a lot of people feel the same way. Well, another problem that we've had this season has been trying to find teams that are likely to get thrashed, and we've seen it a lot of the times this season when some of our popular premium assets flop against a defence that previously looked quite poor. So we've seen Aubameyang just do nothing against Bournemouth. We've seen Abraham do nothing against a Newcastle team who was supposedly coming to Stamford Bridge in relatively poor form, and of course Pukki, most people's last chance saloon on him was Villa, and he did nothing in a 5-1 defeat. So, it's been really hard to target some of these poor defences this season. But at the same time, some of these defences are starting to improve. So we've got a few sort of questions that are kind of, they're not completely all on the same subject, but they kind of all revolve around the same idea of teams that we think are poor. Are they as poor as we think defensively? So, we've got questions from Aberfeldy Weather, who said, will City suffer from a Southampton backlash in game week 11? This idea that they did so badly against Leicester, they'll shut up shop and just play everyone behind the ball and stifle Man City. Tiago said, how should we factor Southampton, Norwich and Watford defences into our plans? Lots of changes, I think, from Watford, and we've had some questions on that as well. We've had Andy Malcolm say, might sound crazy, but Watford defence, should we even invest there? The stats support some improvement, so does the eye test. Where do we go from now? Are they a team that we can't captain players against anymore? And then because some of these defences are starting to improve and they've done quite poorly and their players have depreciated in price, some people, even suggesting investing in the Watford defence or the Bournemouth defence, and people are already on Rico as well. So lots of questions there. We'll come to you first, as on this idea that Southampton could shut up shop and keep Man City out and stop them from scoring 9 goals at the Etihad. Do you see Southampton? I mean, obviously there's a game on tonight, but it's slightly different circumstances. But can you see Southampton? Is there any chance you think that they can kind of respond to that defeat in a positive way for them?
Well, all I can see is they're playing pretty much their strongest team against City's reserves and they're already losing 2-0 at half time. No, they're going to get hammered. They're just... I don't agree that a 9-0 win can suddenly make a team defend really well and shut up shop. If anything, I think their heads are just going to be completely down. I wouldn't be surprised to see City win that game 5-6-0. I don't think anyone would. So I definitely wouldn't be not captaining my City assets because I think they might. No, I can't see them putting up a fight in that game. City's just going to roll them over.
Yeah, what do you think, Andy? Are you predicting the same?
100% in agreement. So, like, as much as Southampton may want to be less rubbish, Man City are the best attacking team the Premier League has probably ever seen. So, I'd see 3 goals as a minimum, 6 goals as a possibility. That type of thing. It's
the best fixture at the best time.
Yeah,
I think for City. So, yeah, I'd definitely be captaining one of them.
Yeah, I'm with you there as well. I've watching Southampton ever since Hasenhüttl turned up. Obviously, he did have an improvement offensively because they're pretty dour under Mark Hughes, but their kind of high press, intense forward play tends to leave their defenders exposed. And, we've seen so many times this season where they're just very exposed in wide areas. And, if they couldn't contain Harvey Barnes and Ben Chilwell, with no disrespect to them, of course, how on earth are they going to contain Sterling and Mendy down that left-hand side? So, yeah, completely with you on that one with Southampton. But it is worth pointing out the improvements that have been made at Watford because in the first 6 game weeks of the season, they were bottom of the league for XGC. And in the second sort of batch, so I've gone for the first 6 of the games of the season and the last 6, they were bottom initially, but then they've started to improve. They're no longer in the bottom 5 for XGC. It's 10.45 over the last 6 matches, but of course that is pretty much almost entirely taken up with that Man City game where they conceded 8 goals, and since then they've really they've kicked on. They've changed defensive formation. They've gone for a back 3, and it seems to be having some impact in some of their recent fixtures. I think that's where this idea is coming from, that some teams are capable of turning it round. When you look at some fixtures, I mean, as when you look at Watford now, are you apprehensive about players playing against them if they're showing this sort of improvement? And I'll throw Bournemouth in there as well, because of course I think they've had 3 clean sheets in a row. People are on Rico as well, and I think a lot of people are asking these questions because premium defenders largely have let us down this year. So if we're trying to go ultra budget at the back, I mean, I don't know if you've got Rico. Are you looking at some of these teams that are starting to turn a corner?
I was original Rico. I had him from the start.
Really? Well, fair play.
Yeah, I thought he might. When that injury to Daniels happened, I thought he might have a bit of a run in the team. I mean, he's done really well. He's been one of my kind of only performing players this season, which kind of says it all, really. The thing is, I think with the budget players, I think there's enough sort of budget players from better teams to not have to consider players like from Watford. I mean, if I was going to go for Watford, I'd probably think about Janmat, who's 4.3, historically quite an attacking defender, playing as a wing back. I think if they swap to a back three. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, playing very
yeah,
advanced.
yeah. So I mean, he got 12 points the other week, so he could potentially be a good option. But I mean, when you've got players like Soyuncu and Tamori and your mate Lundstrom, who I still haven't owned, and Rico, who's taking set pieces, and then you're probably going to have a Robertson or a Trent in there somewhere. Then I think that's your kind of, and then you've got like Tamori as well from Chelsea. I mean, I know they're not giving many clean sheets, but I mean he's 4.7, still with a good run of games coming up. So I think those players are playing for better sides than having to consider a Watford defender or a Southampton defender, anything like that. There's good options sort of under the 5 million mark from kind of top sides, or you can have someone like Lundstrom who's playing in such a box to box role, or you can have someone like Rico take set pieces. I just think going for a Watford defender is probably not really a great idea, or any Bournemouth player other than Rico. Although I've seen quite a few teams with Ake who does do well when Bournemouth keep a clean sheet, but he's a bit more expensive at sort of 5 million.
Yeah, definitely can appreciate that. The Ake's a relatively decent player, can play in midfield, but you're right, just a bit too expensive. What about you, Andy, in terms of the defensive template? Because I think for the forward players, it's been fairly obvious what the template maybe should be or shouldn't be. But with defence, it's kind of, it almost feels like this season it's like the blind leading the blind. Trying to find that defensive template has been quite difficult because the premiums we looked at the start, then they kind of let us down. Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on? I mean, if you say, for example, 5 defenders, you had to pick them now. I mean, what would you go for?
I'm going to say this off the top of my head, but it'll probably be Alexander-Arnold, Pereira, somebody from Man City. So Mendy, based on the talk we had earlier, seems at the front, and I'd probably then choose 2 dead rubbers, so Lundstrom and somebody else cheap like Rico, and that's 5 for fairly good value. So the Watford stuff is interesting. I think what you intimated more from the teams attacking them perspective. So I'm never probably going to want to buy Craig Cathcart in my team. But now that I know he can defend a bit better than a month ago, I may be more or less interested in the teams that are about to face him. So I think that's probably more the key point as to how well they're doing at the moment.
I think the one problem with what Andy's just said though is if you go for a Trent, Mendy, and Pereira triple up in defence, you can't afford to have Mane or Salah, Sterling, Vardy, and De Bruyne. So
True.
you've got to kind of, it's because this is the problem I'm having, is that I'm starting to take some money out of my defence because bringing in Vardy and having De Bruyne and having Sterling has meant that I'm finding it hard to fit in a Liverpool attacker. So it's like you have to sacrifice some. Is it worth sacrificing a defender to have a stronger attack when you've got sort of these teams and these players in form? But then value has been in defence sort of the last couple of seasons. So I think the formation is quite a key one. I think if you can find value in some of the less than 5 million, then it might be worth it. But it's picking that premium defender who's going to get the most points. Pereira, Mendy, Trent, they've all got such good potential. So getting that right is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the emergence of Mendy is really frustrating because I think we're at a crossroads where we could end up in a situation where those 3 premiums you mentioned there, Andy, start doing so well that we can no longer ignore them. And then that's when it becomes really tough because we're forced to sacrifice something somewhere. And some people will make that sacrifice in defence, some people will make it in midfield. People who like the template to not really be too obvious, they're going to love that. Those of us who kind of like strength in numbers and like to protect their, against any rank falls, it's going to be really tough. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But, of course, interesting to know that there are 1 or 2 perhaps budget defenders out there that more so than we thought before. And, of course, it is rather quite sad that Watford are no longer whipping boys, because me and Joe have pretty much every week we've done any captaincy videos. We always keep an eye on who Watford were playing, because under Grathia, especially over the last eight to 9 months, they really were a team that you would consider captaining players against. But, I mean, this Chelsea fixture, for example, coming up, I'm going to start Tomori because Watford still aren't quite... I mean, they're having lots of shots, but they're not getting them on target, or they're not being particularly ruthless. But that defensive improvement could make things quite difficult for Chelsea in the next match. And I'm kind of almost worried now that I've got a double up on them for a game like that, just because they seem to be getting back to what they were good at under Flores before. So definitely worth keeping an eye on what happens with them. Let's come to you now, Az, to talk us through our differentials segment. We've got an update on the screen for those who have done well and have not done well in recent weeks. And, well, Az, now is your time to shine, because top of the pile is you and Marcus Alonso.
Who even cares about normal fantasy football when I've got my differential picks this year? Because I think that's... I think I had Pookie before, so I had him for his hat-trick and some other points. And then I've had Alonso, who's just continued to deliver. It's a shame I can't actually pick anyone decent for my own team, but in terms of these picks, then I'm doing quite well. So, yeah, so you can see on the screen, we changed the format from last season. We pick a player over a couple of game weeks now, so 4 or 5 game weeks rather than just doing it over 1 week. And it's players who are owned by less than 5% of fantasy managers. So these players, in theory, are players who people like me need to be considering, because getting in a player who's less than 5% owned, who gets double-digit points, is a surefire way to a green arrow and to climb up the ranks. So I am very excited to hear who Andy is going to pick for us today.
Well, I feel like I'm banging such a Leicester drum, it's preposterous now. But unfortunately, my pick is Ayos Perez. I do think that he's been set loose now, basically, with the fixtures coming up. Given that it's like a 4-week differential now, if it was just 1 week, I wouldn't have risked it. But with 4 weeks, I think he's probably at least got 2 to 3 goals in him at least over the next month. So I'd pick him. A more sensible me probably would have gone something like Harvey Barnes or something like that, because Burnley have actually got some good fixtures and he's had a bit of a fallow period. But I'm going to stick to my druthers and go with Perez, because I think he'll start. He was a streaky player at Newcastle, always was. So now he's got like his first goal in the net. I think there'll be a couple more to come before November's out of the way.
It's funny with players like him, and it's the same like someone like Richarlison as well of Everton. Yeah. They definitely tend to go on these. They get a goal and then they go on a spurt and then they just stop again. So I think that's a really good pick. I think a hat-trick is hardly going to dampen his appeal. He's gone down from 6.5 to 6.1. He had about 1 million owners at the start of the season, which has now dropped to sort of 200,000 or so.
Yeah, so he just sneaks under the 5% barrier now. So if we does this Scoutcast possibly in 2 or 3 days, I might not be able to pick him either.
Yeah,
timed it right.
Yeah, no, I think he's a good pick. David, anything to add on him?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is unquantifiable, right? But this season has just been a season of absolute horror for most fantasy managers. And as you mentioned, so many people own Perez that it would just be the absolute peak 2019-20 for him to now just go on a ridiculous run that most managers go, you know what, I'm not going to go back to him because I just can't do that, because I know if I get him in again, he'll blank again, and because everyone will do that, that's why he could bang for the next couple of weeks. As you mentioned, the hat-trick will probably keep him in the team at least for the next week. So yeah, great pick there. Yeah,
I mean, if Hudson-Odoi doesn't start at the weekend, and Pulisic and Willian both have good games again, then the switch from Hudson-Odoi to Perez is quite easy. So that might be something I'd consider. Don't know if are you set up for? You've got 3 Leicester, Andy. You've got Maddison.
I've got 3. I'd have 6 if I could, and that's a preposterous thing to say, but we've got options now. I've said it a couple of times this evening, but it's a good time to choose Leicester players.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, why not? If you're a Leicester fan as well, you might as well enjoy some team allegiance while you're at it. Before we move on to what we're doing with our own teams for game week 11, just a quick word on clean sheets. Continuing the Foxes theme, top of the season ticker for defence over the next 6 game weeks is Leicester. and we've already sort of talked about some of the options in defence there. But just to go over their fixtures again: Palace away, Arsenal at home, Brighton away, Everton at home, Watford at home, Aston Villa away. Interestingly, those of you who are particularly daring, Norwich are second on the season ticket for defensive potential, despite being absolutely rock bottom of it for actually being able to capitalise on that. Their defence is still terrible, but Brighton away, Watford at home, Everton away, Arsenal at home, Southampton away, Sheffield United at home. Maybe Tim Krul, penalty saving extraordinaire, is perhaps the only one to consider there. A lot of people have been interested in the Liverpool double up because of their fixtures. Season ticker would back up that in some way. Villa away, Man City at home obviously is quite a tough one, but then Palace away, Brighton at home, Everton at home, Bournemouth away. Although worth saying that John Matip is potentially out for a prolonged period, who has been quite good this season, perhaps has a bigger impact on that defence, dare I say it, just my personal opinion, than Alisson. So worth keeping an eye on that. Annoyingly, another team that are now short of a key defender is Wolves. They're fourth on the season ticker for defence. Arsenal away, Villa at home, Bournemouth away, Sheffield United at home, West Ham at home, Brighton away. But of course, lost Willy Bolly to a broken ankle in midweek. Ryan Bennett's not had the best of seasons. Jesus Vallejo's apparently had a dreadful season. So,
and I'm hoping that's good news for Aubameyang.
Could be. I mean, that's the tricky thing right now. I mean, we were sort of talking about some of the budget defenders earlier on. You look at the top 6 teams for defensive potential, and only really Leicester and Liverpool stand out, because just the other two, I'm not going to go through their fixtures because I don't really think we trust them. Arsenal and Newcastle, I mean, I don't really think we trust the defences there. So Leicester and Liverpool really are the only two teams that seem to be able to marry up a bit of defensive form with defensive potential in fixtures over the next 6 weeks. So I suppose if you're only going to have 2 premium defenders, maybe it's those 2 teams that provide them for you. So yeah, very interesting there. So let's move on to our Game Week 11 teams, and we'll come straight back to you, Andy. I can tell this is yours as I've put up on the screen because it's got 3 Leicester players. So yeah, how are you lining up for Game Week 11?
Well, as mooted, Jamie Vardy looks like he'll keep the captaincy. I'm not as confident about him this week, but again, we're on television, so I'll be able to watch it. I'll be able to cheer him on. If I didn't captain him, it would be more pay actually, because he is playing Norwich, and Norwich are not currently doing a Watford or a Bournemouth, so they look like they could quite easily concede another 3 goals, and Morpay's getting consistently in there. But transfer-wise, I'm probably going to get rid of John McGinn. Like, Villa's fixtures are dreadful right now, and he's fallen off the bandwagon a bit. So it's probably time to either buck the trend and get somebody from Liverpool or City, which I won't do. So I'll probably end up going for someone like Anthony Marshall, I think. Now he's back playing, because he's still pretty cheap. Man United are still Man United, so can you rely on them from week to week? But him and Rashford look pretty good at Norwich. And again, with the caveat that it's Norwich. But I think with their fixtures coming up, he's a solid pick for that price that he offers. That's for sure.
Yeah, looks good. Looks good to me. I'd love to have a team like that, even though it's very different. I would feel very confident about that in Game Week 11. So yeah, very nice. Up next, Az, I do apologise. I didn't get round to putting your bus team in, but I've put your Game Week 10 team back on. Talk us through.
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, remind me of the. Definitely did that on purpose.
Well,
yeah. I mean, I'm a bit more confident in McGinn than Andy. I'm playing him this week at home to Liverpool, who I think are still quite suspect at the back. And Matip's now out for a few weeks as well. So it looks like either Gomez, who hasn't exactly got much confidence, or Lovren's going to play. So I'm hoping he can start. He was actually quite threatening against City. I thought he had a couple of shots. He could have scored. He hit one really sweetly. It just went past the post. Surely Ederson's so good that you can never really feel like anyone's going to score against him unless Otamendi falls over or Stones makes the 10th error of the match. But yeah, I like. I do like McGinn. I mean, you say he's got tough fixtures, but he's got Wolves next without Bolly, and then he's got Newcastle at home after this Liverpool game. So I'm happy to keep him for those 2. And then they turn again. I think he's then got United away and Chelsea or someone. But I've kept him sort of over this period, so I'll keep him again for a few more. I mean, where do I even begin? I've already made my transfers. So Callum Wilson's gone. Vardy's come in. I had to free up some money, so I got rid of Otamendi, who'll probably start and score against Southampton. He's already done that. Today.
Tonight,
yeah. So I got rid of Otamendi just for a 4.2 defender, Kelly. And I mean, I'm now looking and thinking, why didn't I just get rid of Aubameyang for Vardy? The reason why I'm really reluctant to get rid of Aubameyang. I know he's not scoring. I know Arsenal were rubbish. I know they've got so many off-field problems and stuff. But they've got, in game week 13, they've got Southampton at home. And in game week 14, they've got Norwich away. And I've kept him all this time. I want him in for those two matches, because if he's going to score goals this season, if he's going to get anywhere near the Golden Boot, you've got to think he's going to score in those two games. So I'm probably going to hold on to Aubameyang until after those games are done. The questions are, what do I do with Hudson-Odoi if Pulisic carries on his form, and how do I get a Liverpool attacker? They're my two big questions. And the answer is, if I keep Aubameyang, I probably won't have a Liverpool attacker until game week 14. And if Pulisic carries on his form, I'm going to have to lose Hudson-Odoi for probably a Leicester midfielder.
Yeah, lots to consider. Worth pointing out, obviously, Az recently signed up for one of our pro pundit slots in the squad, so he has done another article today on how black box thinking helps him make his decisions. Effectively, that's whenever he makes a mistake, what can he learn from it? And as he's like most fantasy managers, we make plenty of them, so it's really good reading.
It's a long article today as well, because I've made a lot of mistakes.
But yeah, I would definitely encourage people to read it. It's a really good piece, and it's good to have sort of more first person articles on site at the moment. Just capturing the kind of frustration and the kind of thought process behind taking into account a lot of the information that we have on site. So definitely do check that out for some more information on Az's team. We'll finish on my team then. My team. Those of you, people probably noticed the bright glaring yellow of a still intact, unfortunately, Norwich double up, which I was in two minds as to whether or not to get rid of him for this particular game week. But I knew that once Aguero's time was done, I needed to do a bit of surgery. So I used one of my free transfers instead of two of them. I could have moved Pookie on to a few other people. I was quite keen on doing either Mopé or Wood. But I looked at Mopé and thought, I'm not too sure I want him for probably just two fixtures. And Wood was injured and playing Chelsea. So I just felt it wasn't really the right time to move if I'm going to. And I looked ahead and saw that obviously in game week 11, Norwich are away at Brighton, who recently seemed to have sort of started conceding big chances again, as I kind of mentioned earlier on. In the last 4 game weeks, they're joint third worst for big chances conceded, behind Norwich themselves, of course, and Southampton. So I feel like the Pookie party ended ages ago, so I don't really think I'm going to be stinging too many people if he gets something this week. But that, I think, is his last chance, just because it's also Aguero's last chance, and as I'm going to be moving him out anyway, then maybe I can upgrade Pookie into someone. I think I'm going to give him one more week. Aguero, we've already discussed, is probably going to be my captain. I have been frantically checking the Man City Twitter tonight to see when he's coming off. He hasn't come off yet.
It's 2 goals now, though.
He's on the 2 goals, which doesn't surprise me too much. I kind of expected him to score tonight. What I'm really waiting for is him to come off. That will be the true cause of celebration. It just depends on who's going to come off next. Because, of course, the thing is, if Aguero plays this whole game and Jesus gets subbed now, I think I'd still hold on to Aguero, but I would maybe wouldn't captain him, just because, as we've already mentioned, Sterling hasn't played tonight at all. So, it is quite an easy captaincy, isn't it? Because Mendy coming back into the team seems to have pushed Sterling back into that central role a little bit more. I think the chance of Sterling not banging against Southampton are quite low. In terms of my actual transfer this week, I am quite stuck, to be honest. I'm going to have to use it somewhere, but I'm not too sure. I'm relatively happy with the way that it is now, even though it's been quite poor. I feel like I've got big changes to come, so maybe I just downgrade someone somewhere. Could maybe move Hayden onto someone a bit more exciting on the third bench slot. I had thought about, I've already mentioned that I want to keep Pookie, but I did sort of contemplate, as a way of just trying to go for a 1 week punt, just to try and make up a load of ground, bring in Trossard and Mopé against a Norwich defence that is quite poor. But then, of course, I'm left with those 2 players for some fixtures that I don't really want them for. So There's a few options that I could do, but I think it's going to just have to be something around the edges, maybe upgrade Button into another playing goalkeeper, because Burnley doing very well at home, but Pope isn't really making enough saves to kind of, really make up the shortfall when they don't keep clean sheets. So could maybe look for an alternative goalkeeper, could look for an alternative 5th midfielder, because I think it's all about just kind of the calm before the storm this week. Use some transfer in a pretty boring way, and then go for the big, let's change everything the week after, once, as far as I'm concerned, Aguero's kind of potential turns. So we'll see. A lot is dependent on other factors in the rest of the week. So we will have to see. Well, that's about all the time that we've got for tonight's episode. Thank you to Az and to Andy for coming on. It's been a good episode. Thank you for everyone for getting involved in the comments and watching. As we always mention, we've got plenty of more video content coming later in the week. So we'll have our team news videos on Thursday and Friday with Neil, who is always very on it with the press conferences. And of course, we've already done our captaincy video, so we've kind of talked about a lot of the broader subjects of this game week on this. If you want some more focused discussion on the captaincy, we did that yesterday, so check that out on the YouTube channel. And of course, we always use an absolute ton of stats on these things, especially on the Scoutcast. So if you've enjoyed those stats and found them useful, then you can always go and sign up for Fantasy Football Scout membership and see the absolute chocolate factory that is available in the members area. Loads of stuff in there. So if you want to do that, the link is in the description below on how to do that. So make sure you check that out. So, it's a goodbye from me.
Good night, everyone.
Good night from me.
Good night, all.